now is a kind of an open platform. So the idea is really that the end user should become the developer of new applications. So you can run the applications on the pen, and you can easily, or I don't know how easy it is, yeah, but you can write your own applications and publish them on the web, and other people can download your applications and use them on that. So it's really, users become developers and they can start to share their applications, which is a very nice model, which was not there before from a node to where it's much more closed. So we come to the future. I mean, this is again, of course, very, that's my own view. Of course, you have a lot of other things where you see future challenges, and that's maybe also something to discuss, to be discussed later in the workshop. I just listed here some points where I think we still have a lot of work to do. And the first point I have on the list is about the framework. So we have seen now there are plenty of frameworks and people build their stuff, but it's not very easy actually to then have a data exchange and also reusing components from different frameworks, because it's quite customized. The frameworks use their own formats. It's not easy to share actually some functionality between the frameworks. And often also the scalability is quite an issue. So what a lot of the researchers do is they build very nice prototypes, but they're called prototypes because they don't scale. So if you really would like to deploy that to a big audience, you often have then problems in terms of the pattern space, or where do you actually have this pattern registered so that users can easily access it, and so on. Another thing is the deployment, which I think is really important if you would like to really make it available not just in the lab but to regular users. So at the moment it's always up to the user to make sure that he's using the right input device, that he has the application installed, and so on. So first he has to do all the installation, and then he can maybe use the natural user interface like Paper. And what we think what you should have is something else where you actually have your paper, maybe you have such a pen, and you just start to use it. And then behind the scene the system can still check if to which specific application is now this paper document bound, and it could actually automatically download maybe the software, installing on your computer, so you give less burden to the user to make these things happen. I'm not a hardware person, but we were working with a lot of hardware people in the projects, and there is a lot of crazy stuff going on in terms of new pens, of course, or other devices, but also in terms of material sciences. So I will show later an example where the idea is really to have a fusion then of this electronic paper on one side and the regular paper on the other side. And I mean, not just that you can move between them, but you start to combine them. So you can, for example, use specific polymers to print on paper documents and make some kind of display functionality on regular paper. Another thing is the design, visual and interaction design. I mean, we have now paper as a user interface, but what does it mean? I mean, that's quite a new design space. I mean, for graphical user interfaces, we have quite some experience. We know how to design interfaces there. For the kind of paper interface, as some of you might know, there is a lot of freedom, as we heard in an earlier talk, but this freedom can also create a lot of problems to the application designer, because the users, they can just use the system in a way it was not designed to be used. Then the management of the information itself. So there the idea is that, as I said, it can be that maybe you would like to work digitally with your content, maybe on paper, maybe in another type of form. So we should be flexible to have different output channels of the information. So printed media is one output, it could be a computer screen or other outputs. And of course what's always important is that we know what we are doing. I mean, it's not so good just to build the application because we think there is the possibility to do it. We should maybe also think, is it really, does it help to improve either your working performance or whatever, or your experience in dealing with the system. I mean, it's not just for that the system has to be built. So in the following, I would like to focus on a few of these future challenges by showing also some examples of systems that we have built or that have been built by other research labs, and to focus on some of these points. So the first point is the kind of extensibility or reusability across the framework. So what you can see here is actually an example of our solution, our over a few years. So when we started in 2001, at the very beginning, the idea was to have a kind of position encoding system, so not this Anoto system, but something else that could give you the position from paper. But of course, when we kicked off the project, the technology was not yet there. So we had to simulate that, and what we did is we just used regular barcodes, stored positional information in the barcode, and somehow faked the whole thing to that we could really already play with it. Later on, we had then our own prototypes of the pens, then of course Anoto came into play and so on. But the point is it's really important that you decouple somehow the whole application, interaction, whatever, from some low-level devices. So even these oldest applications here, we can still run them today with the most recent Anoto pen. So this application is still running, still existing. It's not that you do something, if a new piece of hardware is there, you throw away the old applications and so on. And it's not just for pens, of course. So here is an example that is a bit related to the interactive storytelling we heard earlier. So I was also working with an artist there with an interactive narrative called The Lost Cosmonaut. And again, we had the pen to write into the story space, but we also wanted, for example, to track the documents in space. So we used also RFID tags to see which document is, for example, lying in front of the screen, and then we would automatically change the lighting, the ambient sound, and so on. So the point here is, your system should be able to deal, of course, with a lot of different input modalities, not just a digital pen. And that's the same thing here. So today we have seen a whole bunch of other solutions. That's why I say pen is one possibility, but there are a lot of other solutions, as we have seen, how you can somehow link from paper to digital information and augment the paper with additional information. So in best case, we would have a platform that can actually be used to implement a lot of these solutions. A bit related is then, especially if you are into capturing handwritten notes and so on, one problem there is that most existing frameworks or toolkits, they always define their own formats. So you capture the handwriting and then you define your format, how it's stored, and of course this makes it already very hard to exchange this information at a very low level. Even if you would just like to capture information and maybe feed it into another framework, that's often not so easy. Even if we have some existing standards like INCML and other languages there, they're not used. So one question here could be, do we maybe need some new common data formats where we could agree that this is a good format to represent 2D information or 3D information, and that we as a community could maybe at least at some level say this is a nice format, and if we start to use it, we can easily exchange data from one platform to another platform. Scalability and also application deployment. This is, I think, a huge problem of existing solutions because they're very isolated applications. If you take, for example, the Anoto stuff, I mean, they have different pens, a lot of applications, but even if the functionality is almost the same for the different pens, you cannot use pen A with application B. So it's even at that point that pens are customized to specific applications, which is again a bit stupid because this means as a user you need 5 different pens for 5 different applications, which is not good. So what we need there is maybe some kind of more open global architecture where we can not just register, map the paper to the digital space within the application context, but on a global level. So this means that we maybe need some kind of a lookup service. If I produce a new application that is bound to some paper documents, I have to publish that somewhere. And then later on, if somebody wants to use that specific paper, he will just do like a DNS lookup on the internet. We have a paper lookup service. You can say, I have now this coordinate in this document, and this lookup service could tell you, but then you need this application, and so on, and you could maybe automatically download that. And then, of course, also a kind of more service-oriented architecture could help, again, to develop some components in a more language-neutral way and exchange these components within the frameworks. How is the time?
You still have 6, 7 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. So the next point is about the visual and interaction design, and I think that's quite interesting, and it was also interesting for us because we are more a software engineering group or database group and not really into HCI. And I think there are really huge challenges there, as we found out by implementing some of the applications. So first of all, how do you, for example, visualize these interactive areas in a paper document? I mean, this is you think, oh, it's not a problem, but it is actually a huge problem. So I have here, to give you an example, that's a project we did 2 times for the Edinburgh Festival. We took a festival guide and we made an interactive version of the festival guide where you have a paper document where you can access a lot of additional information about the events, about you can do ticket bookings and so on. So here is the version from 2004, here from 2005, but maybe I have to start with the version that is not on the screen. So when we started to think about the design, we said, okay, we have now this, the idea is to have this festival guide. We will have some kind of maybe A5 size booklet. We will have some text, because the text is there now in the booklet, so we have to put that somewhere on the page. We would like to capture information, so the user should be able to write content on a paper, and that we should be able to share that. So we said, okay, we need somehow an area where you can write your stuff in. And then we said, yeah, okay, but that's not enough. We also need some specific buttons somewhere, so I can maybe click on these buttons and then trigger some actions, or yeah, like for the bookings or whatever. And then